Welcome to the Smoke Learning channel. Previously, we went through the workflow of upscaling an edited sequence. We unlinked a quarter debayered red media from the sequence, reformatted the sequence to half debayer, and finally relinked the half debayered red media back into the sequence. From the previous video, you have seen that upscaling is a step-by-step process when dealing with a sequence containing only editorial and basic timeline effects. So now the upscaling is complete, and if you start creating ConnectFX composites in the sequence, it is not too much hassle. However, if you have already made a ConnectFX composite at a quarter debayering and you want to upscale it, there are a few points to consider, and it's slightly challenging. Most of the nodes are resolution independent, which means they have their own settings separate to the sequence. So a node like Action, for example, will not have its resolution automatically changed. What if you didn't want it changed? You need to make this decision. Other nodes, such as G-masks for your rotoscoping, are also not scaled up and will need manual adjustment. And finally, if you have been mixing different resolutions into a ConnectFX from other sources, they will also be upscaled when the sequence is reformatted. If that's what you want, then great. However, there are cases when you don't, so manual adjustment is required. Let's look at this example. Here I have a sequence using the quarter debayer resolution, and it contains a segment with a ConnectFX. If we enter into the ConnectFX editor, we can examine the certain sections. Firstly, you will notice that the sky backplate has a JPEG with a 3K by 2K pixel resolution. The red media is at the expected quarter debayer resolution, matching the sequence. If we select the Action node in the ConnectFX schematic and choose the selected node preferences, under the Rendering tab you will see that Action's resolution has been set to a quarter debayer resolution that also matches the sequence. One last item to point out is that a mask is being applied to the green screen image. Switch to the Action Media menu. In the keyer column, double-click on the MK symbol to enter into the modular keyer. If I select the G-mask node and press F1 to see the green screen plate, you will see that the mask is correctly set for the actual frame size. The areas I have pointed out are what you will have to address if you upscale ConnectFX with the sequence. Let's do just that. Exit the modular keyer and exit ConnectFX back to the sequence. As before, I am going to select the sequence in the media library and press Command D to duplicate the sequence. I'll rename it to half debayer. Double-click to open the new sequence in the timeline view. Select the video track and right-click for the pop-up menu. Choose Media and Unlink. Switch to the Media Hub and double-click on the red media file. The debayering setting for these clips are still set at half debayer from the previous example, so we'll go with that. Select the sequence in the media library, right-click and choose Reformat. Once again, I'll just check the settings for the height and the width. These match the half debayer settings for the red media. Press Reformat and the sequence has been upscaled from a quarter debayer to half debayer. Switch to the Conform tab. In the Conform list, you can see that the audio is there and the two video clips are missing. Let's deal with the red media first and then the JPEG file. Click Set Search Location. The media is from one of these files, but we'll get Smoke to scan all to pick the right one. I'll just double-click on one to bring up the preview player and check the half debayer resolution. That's all good, so I'll select the folder and click Set to consider this folder for relinking. So looking in the Conform list, Smoke has found the red media, but not the JPEG. If we knew where it was, we could just set a new search location. However, the media is already in the project since it was used earlier. In the media library, I'll expand the folders to find the JPEG. You can click and drag this JPEG into the Conform Media list and it will now be considered as a potential match for relinking. So just to elaborate what I have done, you can link to media from an external location as well as media already in the project. Right-click on any entry and choose Link Match Sources. Switch to the Timeline tab and the viewers will display an unrendered frame message. Now select the segment and enter into ConnectFX. Looking at the red media, it has upscaled correctly, but the sky plate has also been upscaled to the half Debayer resolution. This may or may not be what I want. To get back to the original resolution for the JPEG, go to the Media Library. Click and drag the sky clip and drop it over the upscaled source node, and it will all be replaced and returned back to its original size. Next, select the action node and let the result view update. You can see straight away that the mask is half the size of the green screen because it was not upscaled in the reformatting. To rectify this, double-click on the action node and switch to the action media list. Double-click on the modular keyer symbol to enter into the keyer. Press Alt-2 to bring up a dual-screen split and double-click on the mask node to see the controls. To scale the mask to the frame, it needs to be double its original size. Click and select the modular keyer schematic. Change the view to the GMOS schematic in the View pop-up menu. Change the Add option from Geom to Axis and click Add. This adds a new axis object into the mask module, which is similar to Action. You can now connect the axis node to the existing axis and mask. Any object transformations applied to the top axis will feed down to the original axis and mask. So double-click on the new axis and scale it to 200%. You do this because the sequence was upscaled from a quarter to a half Debayer. If you had upscaled from a quarter to a full Debayer, the scaling would be set at 400% to match the frame size. The mask is now proportional to its frame. Click Return to exit the modular keyer. Finally, in the Node Preferences for Action under the Rendering tab, the resolution is still set to a quarter Debayer. As I said, Action is resolution independent from the sequence, so it will not be affected by the reformat. So 1280 multiplied by 2 gives us 2560. And 675 multiplied by 2 gives us 1350. Don't forget to press Apply to apply the new resolution settings. You can now exit ConnectFX back to the sequence. The composite is now upscaled correctly with all the right values. I did say it was going to be challenging, and it's worth recapping those points. Nodes that control their own resolutions are not affected by reformatting and require manual adjustment. The masks do not compensate for resolution changes, so they need to be manually upscaled. And finally, there is no rule against mixing formats and resolutions, but reformatting affects all media metadata in the sequence. If that's not what you want, then you need to fix those specific source clips. I hope that you have found these workflows helpful and you know what to look out for when upscaling with Red Media. Thank you for watching, and please subscribe to the Smoke Learning channel for future videos.